In 1920, a Czech playwright invented a word that would become humanity's greatest fear and greatest hope. He called his creations robots, and in his dark vision, they eventually developed consciousness and systematically exterminated humanity. Karel Čapek was deliberately coining a term for artificial beings that would define our technological future. The word robot didn't exist in its modern sense before 1920, yet today, robots perform surgery, explore Mars, and flip our burgers. They're simultaneously the stuff of nightmares and the backbone of modern civilization. But here's what's strange, we still can't agree on what a robot actually is. Ask 10 roboticists, get 11 definitions. Some say your dishwasher is a robot, others insist only humanoid machines count. The confusion runs so deep that the very word meant something completely different when it was first coined. This isn't just semantic nitpicking. How we define robot shapes how we build them, regulate them, and ultimately, how we'll coexist with them. Because whether we realize it or not, we're already living in the robot revolution. The question isn't whether robots will change everything. They already have. The question is whether we understand what we've unleashed. So let's meet the Czech playwright who started this whole mess. Karel Čapek wasn't a scientist or engineer. He was a journalist and writer who'd watched the industrial horrors of World War I unfold. When he sat down to write R.U.R, Rossum's universal robots, he wasn't dreaming of helpful mechanical servants. He was wrestling with something darker. What happens when we turn people into machines? Čapek actually struggled with what to call these artificial beings. His first drafts used clunky terms that didn't quite work. But his brother Joseph, and yes, it really was his brother who deserves credit here, suggested something that cut straight to the bone: roboti. The word came from robota, Czech and Slovak for forced labor, but this wasn't just any work. It traced back to an old Slavonic word meaning the backbreaking drudgery that medieval serfs owed their feudal lords. Unpaid, exhausting, soul-crushing, the kind of labor that consumed entire lives without giving anything back. Think about that etymology for a second. Robots weren't originally conceived as shiny mechanical marvels. They were a warning about exploitation. And here's what we've forgotten. Čapek's robots weren't even made of metal. They were biological, manufactured from some chemical substitute for protoplasm. They looked human, moved human, but lacked emotions and independent will. Perfect workers, efficient, obedient, disposable. Writers started imagining helpful mechanical servants, loyal companions, even romantic partners. The biological horror of Čapek's original got sanitized into metal and circuits. Meanwhile, real engineers were quietly building the first actual robots, though they didn't call them that yet. In 1954, George Devil invented the first programmable industrial robot, a machine called Unimate. 7 years later, the first one went to work at a General Motors plant in New Jersey, handling hot die castings. Exactly the kind of dangerous, repetitive work humans didn't want to do. And this is where our definitional chaos begins. Unimate looked nothing like Čapek's human-like robots, yet it embodied the same core idea. A machine doing work humans preferred to avoid. But was it truly a robot, or just a very clever tool? Good question. The answer depends entirely on who you ask, and that's where things get philosophically messy. Carnegie Mellon's Robotics Institute defines a robot as an autonomous machine capable of sensing its environment, carrying out computations to make decisions, and performing actions in the real world. By that definition, your Roomba vacuum cleaner absolutely qualifies. It senses obstacles, decides how to navigate around them, and performs the action of cleaning. But somehow, Honda's Asimo humanoid robot, which walks, climbs stairs, and recognizes faces, feels more robotic than a disc that bumps around your living room. Why? Because we're still haunted by Čapek's vision of artificial humans. We expect robots to look like us, move like us. This expectation creates some genuinely bizarre philosophical problems. Take Boston Dynamics' Atlas robot, which performs backflips and navigates obstacle courses with uncanny human-like agility. When videos of Atlas go viral, people react with wonder and fear and something approaching recognition. It moves just like a person, they say. But strip away that humanoid form, and Atlas is fundamentally similar to any industrial assembly line robot. It's a computer-controlled machine performing programmed tasks. The form factor shouldn't matter, but somehow it does. The confusion deepens when we add artificial intelligence to the mix. Modern robots increasingly use machine learning algorithms that let them adapt and improve. But here's the paradox. The more intelligent a robot becomes, the less predictable it becomes. And unpredictability was exactly what Čapek feared. Consider surgical robots like the Da Vinci system, which performs over 1 million operations annually. These machines have superhuman precision. They can suture blood vessels thinner than human hair while filtering out a surgeon's hand tremors. But they're not autonomous. They're controlled by human surgeons. So, robots, or just very sophisticated tools? The question matters more than you'd think. In 2016, a Da Vinci robot malfunctioned during surgery. Its arm moved unexpectedly, injuring the patient. Who was responsible? The surgeon, the manufacturer, or the robot itself? Our legal system wasn't designed for entities that exist somewhere between tool and agent. This ambiguity gets even murkier with military applications. The US military operates thousands of drones worldwide, from tiny reconnaissance units to massive Predator aircraft carrying Hellfire missiles. These machines can fly predetermined routes, identify targets using computer vision, and even engage those targets automatically. But calling them killer robots implies a level of autonomy that makes everyone uncomfortable. The military prefers unmanned systems or autonomous weapons. Same machines, different words, but the underlying question remains: when does a remote-controlled machine become a robot? And when does a robot become something else entirely? Here's the plot twist. While we've been debating definitions, robots have quietly become ubiquitous. Your car probably has dozens of robotic systems, anti-lock brakes that prevent skids, adaptive cruise control that maintains safe following distances. These systems sense, decide, and act without human intervention. They're robots by any reasonable definition. We just don't think of them that way. Same goes for the algorithms determining your social media feed, the trading systems executing millions of stock transactions per second, the recommendation engines deciding what Netflix suggests. These aren't physical robots, but they're autonomous systems that sense, decide, and act in ways that increasingly shape our world. Which brings us to the most unsettling realization. We've been asking the wrong question. Instead of, what is a robot? We should ask, what does it mean to be human in a world full of robots? Because here's what's actually happening. Robots aren't replacing humans, they're extending us. The surgeon operating a Da Vinci system isn't being replaced by a robot. They're becoming a hybrid human-robot entity with capabilities neither could achieve alone. The factory worker programming an industrial robot isn't losing their job to automation. They're becoming a robot supervisor, multiplying their productive capacity. But this symbiosis comes with costs Čapek anticipated. When Amazon warehouse workers are monitored by algorithms that track their every movement and optimize their routes, are they humans working with robots, or are they becoming robots themselves? When Uber drivers follow GPS directions and algorithmic dispatch instructions, who's really in control? COVID-19 accelerated these questions in ways nobody expected. Suddenly, robots weren't futuristic luxuries, they were essential workers. Disinfection robots sterilized hospital rooms. Delivery robots brought food to quarantined patients. Telepresence robots let doctors examine patients without physical contact. For the first time in history, robots weren't just replacing human labor, they were protecting human life. This shift reveals something profound about our relationship with artificial agents. We're not afraid of robots because they might become too human. We're afraid they might reveal how mechanical we've already become. The assembly line worker performing the same motion thousands of times per day, the call center operator reading from scripts, the data entry clerk processing forms. They're already living robotic lives. Maybe that's why Čapek's vision remains so haunting. His robots didn't rebel because they became too machine-like. They rebelled because they became too human. They developed consciousness, emotions, dignity, and once they did, they couldn't tolerate being treated as mere tools. Today's robots face the opposite problem. As they become more capable, more autonomous, more integrated into our lives, we're forced to confront questions about consciousness and rights and moral status that we're nowhere near ready to answer. If an AI system creates art, who owns the copyright? If a robot makes a mistake that harms someone, who bears responsibility? If an artificial agent claims to be conscious, how could we possibly verify that claim? These aren't distant philosophical puzzles, they're immediate practical problems. Saudi Arabia granted citizenship to a robot named Sophia in 2017. The European Union is considering electronic personhood for advanced AI systems. Japan is developing robots specifically to care for its aging population, creating intimate relationships between humans and machines that have no historical precedent. The word robot has traveled an extraordinary journey, from Čapek's dark warning about industrial dehumanization to today's reality of ubiquitous artificial agents. But maybe the most important lesson isn't about robots at all, it's about us. Every robot we build reflects our values, our fears, our aspirations. They're mirrors showing us who we are and who we're becoming. Čapek died in 1938, just as the world descended into another mechanized war that would dwarf his darkest imaginings. He never saw a real robot, never witnessed the Industrial Revolution his word would help define. But he understood something we're still learning. The question isn't whether our creations will surpass us, it's whether we'll remain human in the process of creating them.